And yeah, I remember going on the Muppet ride and then having that person come through like, what?
Big Shelf.
Anthony, welcome to That Shelf. It's a pleasure to get to speak with you today about Shelved, your new workplace comedy. I got a chance to watch the first two episodes earlier this week, and I really enjoyed them. I had a lot of fun with them. It might be an obvious place to start, but my first question is, where did this idea come from, and what was the inception for Shelved?
Well, I mean, especially having the experience of writing on The Office, a lot of times people will come to me and say, "Hey, do you have any other Office ideas?" Because there's so many workplaces out there, and they really work as TV shows because they're relatable. People find them familiar. It's just an easy way into something that you want to kind of like quickly kind of engage with. So, for me, when I moved back to Toronto in 2017, I spent a lot of time in Parkdale. I had a lot of friends down there, and I ended up at the library a couple of times just while just kind of hanging out, waiting. And that library, especially, is just like it's so many things to so many different people, and it just felt vibrant. And anytime I'm thinking about new places to put a comedy, you really want to think about what episode one is, but also what episode 100 is. Are you going to be able to sustain a series with this premise? So talking to my co-producers at Counterfeit Pictures, we were just kind of talking about places that were interesting. And one of the partners for Counterfeit, Shane Corkery, is like a huge, huge library nerd. And we were just kind of looking at like, it's, I think it's time. Like we were like, there have been documentaries, there have been podcasts, we didn't know like a sitcom about a library. So we're like, maybe we'll try. We'll see what happens. And so, way back in 2018, we started talking about it. And I actually spent a day at the Parkdale Library, just kind of observing the workers and talking to the branch manager. And there was an actual day transfer there that day, so
Oh, wow.
I got trained with the day transfer.
That's great.
That kind of led to like a lot of just like figuring out different things with the library. And what I love about it is that you kind of talk about a couple different touchstones for the show, and you think about The Office because obviously it's a workplace and you have a lot of different characters and people who work there are all interesting. You also think about Parks and Rec because of the
Yes.
bureaucracy of working with the government, the idea of service and being a public servant and those kinds of things. But you also think about Cheers because it's a workplace, but it's a place where stories can walk in the door on
Right.
a regular basis. And so for those reasons, I just felt like this premise had like a lot of legs if we could convince a network to put it on TV. So we thankfully found that in our best friends at CTV. So yeah, but it's just one of those things where like now like as soon as we announced it last year, the outpouring of like I need to see this was great. I was getting all kinds of people sliding into my DMs like I'm a librarian from Atlanta. I'm like just people from all around the world just kind of saying like I've got so many stories. This is I can't wait to see it. So everyone connects to libraries in a different way, and so it's like we're already starting from a place where there's that familiarity that you need to start a TV show. So that's kind of where it all kind of started.
I love that Cheers comparison because, what makes this show very unique from a lot of other workplace comedies, from what I noticed, there are many things that make it unique. But one of the things that I especially related to is that this is a community space, like you were talking about, much like Cheers, how a bar can kind of become a community space or like a barbershop can become a community space. So too can a library. But it also has that appeal that I think shows like Abbott Elementary also have, where it's that it's an underrepresented space on TV, and in terms of the people who work there, especially, which sort of leads into my next question. What is your connection to libraries? Do you have fond memories of libraries yourself from your childhood or even your adulthood?
Yeah, absolutely. Even today, like when we moved back to Canada, we eventually found ourselves living in Markham, just outside of Toronto, and the library system here is excellent. Like every community center has a library, and they're all fantastic. I take my kids there, and we get books, and it's just like it's one of those things where you just it just feels warm and great. And for me, as a kid, I always remember using the library for all kinds of like I just I'm of that age when we didn't have computers in our home all the time, so we would have to go and look things up in what we call books. So, so I spent a lot of time in my childhood library. up in Hillcrest, up near Leslie and Cummer. Like, so I was there quite a bit, like doing my projects. And then even like in high school, when I was going to the bigger libraries in North York, we went to Fairview and the Central Library up there near Mel Aspen Square. I was just there all the time, like doing work, and it was a quiet place to work because I don't know how, like, I had a younger brother and a sister, and there's always people in the house. You just need some place to kind of just focus in and do that sort of stuff. And also, like, for me, like personally, like my wife and I, we met in high school and we were friends. We met doing a play. She went to the all girls school across the street from my all boys school, and we were
I
doing a
love that.
play together. And Joseph and the Mace Technicolor Dreamcoat. I was the
Hey,
villain.
shout out.
Yeah, there I was standing with baskets of bread.
Yes.
Um, and she was one of the wives, and so we were friends while we're doing it. But then we started hanging out together in libraries, doing she was doing her homework, I was doing my homework, and so that connection happened too, like in a library. So there's a lot of history for me in libraries, and I'm just glad that I get to explore some of that in the show.
Yeah, it can be sort of a romantic meet cute space, which is sort of what we're seeing with some of the characters in your show.
Indeed.
So another great thing about the show that I think makes it very unique from a lot of other workplace comedies is that there are no side interviews. There's no sort of like documentary artifice around it. It sort of just uses the stylistic tenets of those comedies to just sort of streamline the tone and the flow and the comedic delivery and everything. Was there ever a version of this that included more kind of office style interviews at all, or was there like a conscious choice to want to shed that from the execution?
Yeah, it was a conscious choice to not include it from the very, very beginning. Uh, we really, I mean, I love that device. Obviously, the
Of course,
mockumentary
yeah.
device is fantastic. I really felt like we didn't need it for this show. I didn't feel like we needed to kind of step out of the world. And also, I'm a purist with those kinds of things. Like, I don't like, for instance, I love the way The Office did it, but I don't love the way Modern Family did it. You know what I mean? Like, I Modern Family is a great show, but like I would always find myself like, why is the documentarian there? Why are they doing that in front of the camera?
Yes.
I'd always ask those questions, but
Yes.
I didn't want to get to a place where I was like I was trapped in a place where my brain wouldn't let me do something in front of a camera. And I think
Mm,
there is a place for certain shows. Like I love moments in Parks and Rec and The Office, and where Abbott Elementary. I love Abbott Elementary. I think it's
of
great.
course.
I love those moments where you're doing something in front of a camera and then that person sees it. Like I think that's fantastic. But for this show, I didn't want to go down that path. So it was a very conscious decision at the very beginning. And then once we got the green light to make the show, we absolutely were like, well, let's use it just feels like the right kind of tone for a library show. Like you think about documentaries and just documenting what's happening and not judging. I think that's also part of the thematic thing, right? It's like we're not trying to judge the people who use the space or the people who are in this space. We're just trying to tell their story. So that's kind of why we kind of went with the documentarian angle with the stylistic choice we made there.
Yeah, it is kind of it's a great choice because it's a very quiet style. It's a very sort of deadpan, I guess is one word to use for its style,
Mhm.
which is perfect for a library where it's kind of like very quiet and it is sort of a deadpan environment. So and also it's so validating to hear you say all of that because I do sometimes watch these comedies and I'm like, but why what are they shooting a documentary? It doesn't seem like
Yeah,
they're acknowledging it at all in the show.
I loved when I worked in the office. I loved writing scenes where the cameras had to work to get
Yeah,
information. Do you know what I mean? Like I love and it's funny because like Randall Einhorn, who was the DP for The Office for many years. Like he's one of the lead directors for Abbott Elementary. Like you can totally see like he's bringing that style. He's been a camera person for doc stuff, so he loves those moments where the camera finds things, right? So
mm,
you can tell that Abbott's really like they honed in on that as well.
for sure, absolutely. I would love to hear a little bit also about the set. I am personally an American. And I am learning a lot of new things about Canada and its wonderful towns. So I have to ask, as a total layman, is this the Parkdale Library or was it a reconstruction?
As a reconstruction, it's fairly similar to what it used to look like.
Mm,
So they had a little bit of they got like some upgrades a couple of years ago. Like right after right after I went to visit them and hung out with them, like they were waiting for upgrades at that point. So it kind of looks like Parkdale a little bit like before the upgrades, where it's kind of like it's not had seen a lot of love. Like I love the set was great. Like Brendan who did the set, Brendan Smith who did the set was fantastic. Like he really put the artist like really went into like the walls and created like watermarks and just like burn marks and all kinds of stuff to make it feel like a space that had not seen a lot of love since the 1960s. Um, and then on top of that, we have to thank the Toronto Public Library for lending us 16 pallets of books. So
Wow.
we were like, we we're kind of in a place where like, what are we going to do? How are we going to find books? That was the big question. And we went to the library and they're like, well, we have all these books that are out of service. Like they're not in circulation anymore. They're just kind of sitting in the factory. How many linear feet do you want? And we were like, linear feet.
That's amazing.
So we literally borrowed the books from the library. We have them on extended loan, and then we took them back after we're done shooting. And then we'll get them back again when if we're lucky enough to get a season 2. Then we'll have them there again. So thank you to them for letting us use those books. And of course, we have a bunch of books, and we got some books as well from like a few different publishers that were kind of like let us just kind of like have like they were like, here's a box of like 150 of our titles. You're free and clear to use them. And so just we kind of like went to a lot of different places to see if we could fill the space, and some very, very nice people let us use their things. And then, like I said, like the team that built the set and decorated it, and like I can't say enough about the wonderful artists that put their time and efforts into creating that set, because we had librarians come in to the set. That's and they walked around and they were like, yeah, this
a library.
You did it. And we were just like, yeah.
That's awesome. And I can't I have to imagine that this is a wonderful show for librarians or library nerds to watch, because there are some really fun sort of wordplay moments, modern wordplay like thrown in the script, like Howard's nickname is Big Library, which I thought was hilarious. And there's also this one great line where Jack says something like, "Oh, that's just straight fiction section. That's pure fiction section," which is so funny. And I was wondering, do you have a favorite kind of little moment of library modern wordplay that you got to throw into one of the scripts? Maybe it's in a script that we haven't yet seen.
There's an episode entitled Moby Dick later on. And there's a monologue. I'm not going to tell you whose monologue it is, but there's a monologue in that episode that kind of harkens back to Moby Dick in a way. And moments like that where the people who get it are going to really get it. And they're going to really be like, oh, I see what you did there. And I see how you used the book and these characters and what they're going through to kind of really use the literary device in that book in the show. So moments like that, like that's one of my favorite moments of the season. Like that monologue that will happen in I think it's episode 6.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So, but I think in every episode there's like little connective tissue, because I love doing it, but my writers, they had a lot of fun putting this stuff into the world. So we had a blast making this show. And just because we're all I feel like all the writers, I can speak for all of us and saying like we're all nerds. We all love that stuff. We all love putting it into the world, and then getting our amazing actors to say those words out loud was an absolute treat.
Speaking of nerds, I gotta tell you, as a Muppet nerd myself, all of these Muppet Show references are so killer. And I love seeing that kind of Muppet fan representation that we need on television.
We need it.
As just a fan, I have to ask, is this a writer's room of Muppet fans? Like, what was the inspiration to include that as a trait for Wendy's character?
Yeah, like I first of all, I'm a huge Muppet fan myself, and a lot of the other writers are too. Here's the thing, right? Like for me, like Kermit was the ultimate showrunner. You know what I mean? Like that to me is like
I love that. Absolutely.
Like Kermit is the ultimate showrunner, and I always feel like I'm living that Kermit lifestyle because because I constantly am surrounding myself with weirdos to make a TV show. Like that's my life. Like and I look around set and I'm just like, this is the dream. Like I'm living that Henson life. And so Wendy is like that too, right? Like Wendy is that person who is like she's the Kermit of the show. She is the person who's got to pull all this together and turn it into something and is into a, like we say, a beautiful mess. And so that's kind of like why we felt like that it just felt right. And we don't do as many Muppet connections later on, but we definitely wanted to set up that that Wendy's a character who loves her some Muppets.
I love that. Season 2, try to throw in a Sweetums reference
All right,
just for
done.
me, for old time's sake. I was actually just at Disney World in Florida recently, and they have a Muppets attraction there, and Sweetums is the only actual like puppet character that's in the ride, and they have a full body performer who like does the
Yes,
shtick. It's
I
really,
do.
really fun.
Yes, I remember because we went to, was it Disney World? I think it was Disney World a couple years ago. And yeah, I remember going on the Muppet ride and then having that person come through like, yeah.
Such a highlight. Speaking of highlights, I would love to talk a little bit about the second episode. One of my favorite scenes is when we meet Sheila and her father in the coffee shop. I thought that was such a great little vignette there. And I have to imagine that kind of dynamic between Sheila and her dad does not come from nowhere. So I have to ask, what inspired that dynamic to be included in the show? And from what I gather, that is not the last time we're going to see Oswald. Am I correct?
No, you're just not the last time. You're also going to meet Sheila's mom in a later episode. Oswald and Dina, who played Dina is Sheila's mom. They're loosely based on my actual parents. So my parents are divorced and they just can't be around each other. Like it's funny because they're actually gonna be around each other like on Monday. We're doing like a little tiny launch party and I invited them.
Oh,
both.
that's great.
We're gonna see what happens.
Oh boy, here we go.
Because my parents are from St. Kitts and Nevis. My dad's from Nevis. My mom's from St. Kitts, and I actually grew up on the island a little bit when I was a kid. So that's also the reason why there are like St. Kitts and Nevis flags, and I made the character from my old homeland. And so we actually got some stuff from the St. Kitts tourism group for the set, which was great. They were like, "Yeah, here, take some stuff." And I was like, "Oh,
that's great. That's awesome."
So that's kind of like, so it is like absolutely like based on like not just like my dad and my mom, but like those, like especially for like people from Toronto. There's a lot of people from the Caribbean, from the Caribbean heritage here, and we all know that man. We all know, and who's just like does not want to be bothered. It will look at you hard when you're trying to get him to change his ways. Like he's very much a character that people will connect to and understand. And I think having Sheila's parents be a part of the show, to me, just made her feel like now she's got even more dimensions now, and just like also having like like you kind of, as a show, you kind of want to have an external place to kind of have have scenes and have commentary and have people go and take their breaks. And so I was just really into having a coffee shop that was run by my parents, and the story goes that Oswald and Dina run the shop, but they can't ever be there together at the same time. So that's the reason why Sheila's usually there in between to kind of like cover that to cover that transition.
I love that. And this show does not make a huge thing about race. It's very much not an element of the show, but at the same time, it does feel substantial that we have a show here, two Black leads running it, and then we have these other perspectives, your Caribbean perspective that you're throwing in there. And you've spoken a lot about how you struggled as a writer of color post The Office, and I'm wondering, was it important for you from the very beginning to incorporate those kinds of perspectives in this show?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like it's one of those things where there's like, it's just underrepresented, right? And so there's so many points of view. There's so many different ways to get into these worlds, and this is one way. And I think what's nice is that, like, you can have this version, but there are other stories from other people that will be different and valid, and you should watch those too, right? So in my world, I've always had a diverse group of people around me, like as a just growing up. And so it feels like the most, especially if you're going to set something in Toronto, it just feels like a natural way. And that's one of the reasons why we chose Parkdale, because Parkdale feels like a really, really, like, not just like race, but like socioeconomic diversity. And there's just like even with people with different abilities, and just like some people who are disabled, there's a lot of different people who live and work in Parkdale. And so it felt like a natural way to include that diversity without making it feel forced. You know what I mean? Because I feel like it's one of the things, like you're mentioning, like the show just feels natural. It doesn't feel like anyone's out of place. It just feels like everyone belongs. So that was important to me for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of beautiful. The show is really a tapestry. You have characters of different political affiliations. You have a character who's unhoused. You have all of these different perspectives all coming together, and it makes for just this wonderful sort of melting pot of a series,
Yeah.
which was something that I think is going to appeal to a lot of people.
Oh, thanks.
My last question here for you is, you worked on The Office and you've done some work for the Thundermans, and now it seems like you're thoroughly back on your home turf. You're doing a show, you're show running this show. You're also working on Run the Burbs, second season of Run the Burbs. How does it feel to just sort of be, honing in on Canadian content again, being back on your home turf?
It feels great. Like I feel there's so many stories to tell. And it's nice to be home, to be able to kind of like really just kind of like delve into like uh some of these shows and just being able to be a part of it, and also just being a mentor for a lot of writers. Like I do even just before this call, I was talking to another writer, another person who was just like had some questions about what they're working on, right? So it's nice to be here to kind of help use my experience in the US and the UK and in here to kind of like help people kind of find their way and find their footing so that they can be the ones that are helping other people in the future. So it's yeah, I mean it's been nice. It's been a lovely homecoming. I really I'm really glad to be back.
Well, we are glad to see you back. New episodes of Shelved begin on March 6th, with new episodes Mondays at 9:30 p.m. on CTV, as well as online at CTV.ca and on the CTV app. Anthony, thank you so much for joining us, and best of luck on the first season.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you.